Hi everyone and welcome back to a slightly rainy garden, and today I want to talk about three plants that have grown really well for me here this year. They're all plants with a certain reputation for growing really well, for upsizing really quickly and for being absolute showstoppers in the right location. But I'm really glad they've grown well for me here this year, mainly because it's the first year we've had the garden now, so I didn't really expect a lot of plants to grow that well in the first year. They're more sort of settling in, finding their feet and just starting to grow, but they've actually really surprised me with just how big they've got. And the second thing, this year has not been the best year for growing a lot of tropical plants. So these are the plants that have really sort of defied the weather and grown really well despite that. For regular viewers, once you've seen the first two plants, chances are you'll probably be able to guess what the third one is. It's a plant that I've definitely shown off a lot on videos on Instagram and definitely one of my favourites already in the garden. But once I've shown you these three plants, I want to talk about something that ties them all together and why these kind of plants are definitely an essential part of an exotic garden, certainly for me anyway. So the first plant I want to feature is Salvia amistad, and you might have noticed a few plants dotted around the garden in my recent tour video. I've actually got 6 plants. I bought 1 pack of plugs back in late spring, and I think it was 6 plugs for just over a tenner. So they're not very expensive, and once you've got salvias, you can take plenty of cuttings, so you've basically got as many as you want. Salvia amistad is a plant that definitely comes with a certain reputation. It's one of the best doers in terms of a salvia that brings that colour for as long a period in the garden as possible, and it's definitely done that here. Whilst it's definitely a tried and tested plant, it's not something that I've grown myself before, and the main reason for that is, at our old garden, the actual planting area was quite small, and for a couple of years at least, I only had one triangle of exotic garden. What you find is, in a small exotic or tropical garden, you really have to be so particular about every single plant that goes in. So when it comes to colour, you can't just have plants with normal looking foliage and then really bright flowers. You need plants like the cannas that you'll see behind me that have got exotic foliage and bright flowers as well. And I think really you need to concentrate on every plant choice in a small garden to make sure it really fits the vibe. But when you come to a bigger garden, like we've done here, you tend to find that there's a lot of gaps, and there's only so many exotics you can overwinter or even just afford in the first place. So good cheap filler plants are definitely something that was on my list this year to fill in all these little gaps and try to bring that exotic colour and tie together all the foliage plants. Salvia amistad was one of my first choices, the first time I've grown it, but I know it came with a certain reputation and it's certainly not let itself down. It's a plant that grew really quickly from the plugs that I got in late spring. They've sized up very well, a little bit too big in some places and they're starting to flop over a bit, but definitely it's a plant that's going to feature in the garden for years to come. It's got these amazing purple flowers, the bees love it, and it's a plant that's very easy to sort of repeat down the garden. So whilst the plants are not entirely hardy, I will be digging a few up and I will be leaving a few in the garden. But the ones that I'm digging up, it's not just for overwintering, it's so I can move them around next year and try them in a different position. So for me, it's a plant that I didn't spend a lot of money on, but it's definitely delivered a lot of colour and has grown really well for me this year. The second plant I'm going to feature is a bamboo, and probably one of the most visually appealing bamboos you can grow here in the UK. It's Berinda papyrifera, and if you don't know a lot about it, it can potentially grow into a plant that looks like this. It's an amazing clumping bamboo, amazing for several different reasons. So firstly, it's got a lovely blue colour to the culms, and that in itself makes it absolutely incredible. But secondly, it's a bamboo that upsizes very quickly, and that's one of the main reasons that drew me to it. It's not a bamboo that needs to get really wide before it gets tall. It's a very tight clumping bamboo, but one that upsizes and gets really tall very quickly. So it's not a plant that I've grown for a lot of years, and I didn't have many big specimens before I moved here. Most of our big specimens were the vivax bamboos at the far end of the garden. The Berindas, I bought a few the year before last, and then last year when I knew we were moving house, I bought a few smaller divisions as well just to go alongside them. So it's a plant I've definitely got quite a lot of in the garden, several different varieties, but mainly the CS1046, which is a Chris Stapleton collection and an incredible plant. So like I said, it's a plant that upsizes quickly, it's a clumping bamboo, it's got an amazing blue colour, and also with it being a bamboo that's a Berinda, it doesn't really need huge amounts of heat to actually grow well. So I think that's one reason why it's especially well suited to the garden here. A lot of the garden, as I showed you in my last tour video, a lot of it's shaded by some quite big trees, so I need plants that can grow well sort of despite that lack of sun. A lot of the midday sun is actually blocked out. So Berinda is a plant that was only put in as small plants last year, but I'll just show you now how quickly it's actually grown. So the original height of the plant was around 1 foot tall, and as you can see, it's already grown all this height up here to around 6 foot tall. So as you can see, the Berindas, when I planted them last autumn, they're around 1 foot or so tall. and I expected them to get to maybe 2.5, 3 foot tall this year, but they've doubled that. And they've already grown up to around 6 foot tall. So while they're not entirely impressive just yet, they're starting to show that blue colouring, and I'm sure they'll continue to size up very quickly. I'd definitely recommend Berinda papyrifera if you want a bamboo that gets quite decent culms or canes but doesn't get unmanageable, because they are a clumping bamboo. They're reasonably sort of tight in the scheme of things. They don't get to be an absolutely massive clump like some of the other Fargesias. They're quite tight, they don't take up a lot of garden space, but you get quite tall, quite chunky culms, and they do grow very quickly. So if you want something a little bit different, something where even your tropical garden friends will really admire it once it gets to a decent size, Berinda papyrifera has definitely got to be up there. Now the third plant that's grown really well for me this year, it won't surprise any of you, it's my amazing Gunra manicata. So yes, I know you've seen this plant and this angle before. This is the Gunra manicata. And I know we have used the word favourite, but this genuinely has been my favourite plant in the garden this year. Its growth has absolutely surpassed my expectations. I knew it would get big, but I thought it would take a few years to get to this kind of size, and it will need to develop a lot more at that base before it really put out these big leaves. But as you can see, they're absolutely colossal. It's definitely a giant plant, and something that's grown really well because of where it is in the garden. So it's a plant I've grown previously in containers, and they did alright. They put out some big leaves, but certainly nothing quite as big as this one, let alone that leaf there. And at the old garden, this actual plant was in the garden there for around a year, planted out into the ground, and again, it never put out any spectacular leaves. It grew well, but nothing as big as this. So I think here, the combination of the right spot under the shade of this big cherry tree, keeping that really harsh midday sun on the days when it is actually sunny off it, having a sort of damper spot really, so it doesn't need a lot of additional watering. I think those two factors have really combined to help find the right spot, the right plant, and it's really grown well. So hopefully you can see how dark it is. It started raining again, it's not even 7:30, and I've had to put the video light on. Things are good and the seasons are definitely changing. But why have I talked about these 3 plants today? It's not just to show off that I've had 3 plants that have grown really well. Believe me, I've got more than 3 plants that haven't grown as well as I wanted them to. But I wanted to mention them because there's one sort of consistent thread that ties them together. And that's that if you're growing a tropical or exotic garden, it doesn't have to be full and rely solely on plants that need a lot of summer heat, a lot of summer sun, and a lot of humidity to grow really well. So certain banana varieties, a lot of the fancier colocasias, they really need amazing heat, amazing humidity, lots of watering and feeding to get to those really big sizes. And chances are, the pictures you've seen online are either in USA, Central Europe, or just grown inside hothouses. They really won't get to those sizes in most UK summers. And when we get a summer like this one, which has definitely been a shorter season than usual, because those late frosts, a lot of areas had frosts late May into early June, that combined with the inconsistent summer weather like this, it's not the best recipe for getting an impressive looking tropical garden. If you've got a short season and you don't have that heat, a lot of those plants are going to be disappointing, at least compared to your expectations of how big they could get. So I think it's important in any kind of exotic or tropical garden, although tropical's the style, all the plants don't have to be strictly tropical, and you can have plants from all over the world that enjoy a variety of different conditions. So whilst the Gunra is from Brazil, it likes the warm temperatures, it also likes a lot of rain, a lot of watering too. The Berinda, it thrives in a sort of dappled shade, plenty of water, and it doesn't need a lot of summer sun. And likewise with the salvia, I found that planted in a variety of different locations in the garden, it's thrived even in spots with a bit more shade when you ideally plant something that can deliver that much summer colour. So those are just 3 plants that are growing really well for me. I'm going to go inside because it's absolutely chucking it down. I'll see you in the next video.